Hello there, I'm Tony Gale and you are listening to We Are West Ham podcast.
You are listening to the We Are West Ham podcast with me, Will Pugh, Tom Edwards and James Jones. And it is 62 years to the day since a 17-year-old Bobby Moore made his West Ham debut against Manchester United. But rather than remembering the great man fondly, fans today are instead suggesting Bobby would be ashamed to see the way the club is being run, with some even saying he would be turning in his grave. We recorded our last show just before the Grady Diangana explosion. And in 7 days, West Ham have sold one of our brightest young talents to direct relegation rival, a usually silent on social media captain, Mark Noble, backed up by several members of the first team squad, spoke out against the club's decision to sell Diangana. Anger towards the board is at an all-time high, and to cap it all off, we got convincingly thrashed 5-3 at home by recently relegated Bournemouth in the Betway Cup final on Saturday. The silverware that Jonesy so coveted gone into the clouds. I had the pleasure of attending Saturday's game, my first match since lockdown, but as always, nothing comes close to the pleasure I experienced recording the We Are West Ham podcast with James Jones and Thomas Edwards. Lads, a crazy week. Lovely to see you again. A packed show coming up. First of all, James, I'll go to you first. How are you?
I'm all right. I suppose the big question this week, Will, after you had your little outburst last week, is how are you?
What about my knee, you mean? Is that what you meant? How's your knee?
When I listened back the following day, I noticed that you were like, no one asked me how I am, so I'm just going to tell you anyway. So I'm asking now. I mean, I'm absolutely fine, mate. Yeah. If not, a little bit frustrated with what's going on, but we'll get into that. But how are you, mate?
Okay. Little update on my health. Do you want the good news or the bad news?
It's always good to start with good news, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. Well, the good news is my knee has improved tenfold. Still a little bit achy, but I think I'll be right as rain as planned in time for my surfing holiday, which I'm still planning on going on. The bad news is I have contracted tonsillitis. Full-blown antibiotics. I did have a COVID worry at first because I started feeling a bit fevery. However, I've been smashing the antibiotics in for a couple of days and the ibuprofens. So just so my voice holds up for the We Are West Ham podcast. So always got an ailment to tell you about, Jonesy. But so yeah, knees better, thanks. Throat's quite bad, but I'm powering through.
Wish I never asked, mate.
Yeah.
Sounds awful.
Right.
That's actually why you never ask me how I am, isn't it? I've just realised. Tom, how are you? Any? I don't really want too many health problems if we can. More how you doing and how you coping, given the you're probably the angrier of the three, which is a title I'm glad you've taken off of me.
Yeah.
The We Are West Ham show. But how are you? How are you coping this week?
All good, up to my eyeballs in rage, actually, mate. But yeah, body's fine. Left foot, the money foot's still going, so I'm all right with that. But
the money maker.
Yeah, exactly. You know it. But yeah, mate. Apart from being heartbroken that my Grady Diangana's elsewhere in pastures new, I'm holding up all right, mate. No complaints my end.
Well, I'm very, very pleased to hear it. We will, of course, as I say, the show we recorded last week came just before the storm hit, really. There was not necessarily positivity among the boys because we still hadn't done much in the transfer window, but it was basically the day that the podcast went live. That's when the Grady Diangana explosion happened. As I say, loads has happened since then. We will, of course, cover that on the show. We'll wait to that for that until segment 2. So we can really do it a bit of justice. But I'm sure a lot of you listening will have heard lots of different views and have your own views on that during the week. So we'll talk about the Bournemouth game. Lost the Betway Cup. They're the 5th different winner, Bournemouth, of the Betway Cup. It's only been running 6 seasons, and West Ham won it once. That says it all. We were shambolic in defence, to be fair. Josh Cullen might have been a small positive. We'll speak about that. We'll cover the headlines. There's the news, obviously, that a lot of the 3 o'clock games will now be aired, or all the non-televised games will be on TV, so fans will be able to watch their team for the next month. The Carabao Cup tie, as it's now called. With that draw took place, the squad numbers were announced. Thomas Souček self-isolating. We'll look at some transfers, even though it's a bit of a lull segment now, because what's the point? The Diangana saga we'll, of course, cover. We asked you, the We Are West Ham listeners, what you thought, where the Diangana money should be reinvested on Twitter, so we'll talk about that. We've got some guests tonight, as we will have for the remainder of the season. 2 tonight, Oscar Paul, the Sun newspaper's Northeast reporter, will be on to do our first opposition view of the season as we look ahead to the Newcastle game on Saturday. That's been moved to an 8 o'clock kickoff today, I believe, the Newcastle game. They have been making signings. One of our previous episodes was called the London version of Newcastle. I don't think that is the case anymore because they're going out and doing bits in the transfer window. Name That Game is back. We've got a finalised format for you. So the league table kicks off from today, and we've got Ella German, West Ham fan, sports journalist and women's football expert on, last of all, to talk about the West Ham women's team who drew 1-1 with Tottenham at the weekend. Loads to pack in tonight, gentlemen. Looking forward to having some guests on and some different voices from ours. Jonesy, I'll start with you first. We have got a busy one coming up. For the bit of housekeeping that we like to do at the beginning of each show, I was very disappointed with the listeners after last week. I asked really nicely if they could give us a review on their chosen podcast platform. I have only checked Apple this evening, but nothing. Do you think it's because they were too grief-stricken to hear about my knee?
I think so, yeah. But I don't know whether you've received any letters in the post, Will, about sort of, get well soon cards or something like that, mate.
That's true, actually. I haven't checked, but you would have thought if we check the We Are West Ham pod at gmail.com email address where any of the fans can get in touch with us, I imagine there'll be a few well wishes in there, will there?
No, unless they landed in spam, which I mean, maybe you must have just gone get well soon. Nah,
that's it.
Straight in the bin.
Josie, we got a fantasy football league, though, haven't we? Tell everyone about that.
Yeah, we got Fantasy Football League. I think we've got about 300 people in there now, which is a decent haul. Should make for a decent competition this year. It's the Fantasy Premier League game. If you haven't already joined, then make sure you do. The code is CNY6OU, all in lowercase. CNY6OU. Get over there. I think what we'll do is before the deadline later this week, we'll send a link out which will automatically send you straight into the league. So you don't have to remember that code. But yeah, we'll tweak that out. But if you're listening now and can't wait to join and get involved, then it's CNY6OU.
Absolutely. And Tom, after a couple of technical difficulties last week, fans of the podcast who for whom our voices are not enough can also watch us on YouTube. The YouTube channel link will go in the podcast description again this week. If you're listening, you can also find it in our pinned tweet on Twitter at @WeAre_West Ham. But you can watch us again this week, Tom.
Yeah, exactly. And if you guys have noticed or not, I've actually shaved because I watched it back and I was thinking, Christ, where did they pick this guy up from? But it'll be up there hopefully early tomorrow, either by the morning or mid-afternoon, 12-ish, hopefully, is when it will come out and you can see our ugly mugs and enjoy it that way as well, which is a nice little thing to have. Absolutely.
Well, that's housekeeping out the way. Like I say, review us, subscribe, whether it's on podcast platforms or YouTube channels, whichever you like. You're also welcome to not do that, by the way. That's absolutely fine. But yeah, do join up. Join us on all platforms and, of course, the fantasy football as well. So let's get straight into it then, lads. Now that's all out the way. The Bournemouth game, first of all. Jonesy, I was at the game Saturday. I was really privileged to be able to go. It's my first one since lockdown. And beforehand, I thought I was really lucky to get to go. And to be honest, even now, I still do feel the same way. It was brilliant to be back in the stadium watching it. Very surreal, but just a shambolic game of football. I mean, the fact it was 2-2 at half time was a complete fluke. Bournemouth went to sleep and Josh Cullen came on and looked like peak Manuel Lanzini for the space of 5 first half minutes. But they're defending for Bournemouth's goals and concede 5 goals at home. And I know I'm one who always bangs a drum about not caring about pre-season, but 5-3 at home to a championship team, Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't just quite as lucky as you, mate. I didn't get a chance to see it. I was on a stag do, so but I was getting the goal updates on my phone, and Yeah, I mean, I'd like to say I was surprised, but when I saw, I think when it went 5-3, I thought, the comeback's on. But having watched the highlights, because I watched the highlights this time, unlike the last game, it's head in hands defending, and I know I keep saying that pre-season results don't matter. By that last pre-season game, the curtain raiser, as they like to call it, before the season starts, you like to think that everything's ironed out, any issues ironed out, communication problems ironed out. You're back to full match fitness. This is the last go before you start the season, and you don't expect mistakes and sloppy defending to be creeping into your game. So it makes this weekend a little bit more of a worrying prospect, doesn't it?
Tom, did you watch the game again?
I did again. Yeah, I was sad enough to watch it, and like Josie said, I thought just in general the defence was poor. I know Friday we obviously had the news of Dian-going, which, like you said, we'll get to later, but that obviously clearly rocked a few players. Johnson, who grew up with him, he had one of the worst 20 minutes I've seen anyone put in any game, let alone a friendly.
Pulled off after 25, yeah.
I don't want to call him out. He's clearly a really highly talented player. That doesn't affect how I see him. He's a talented bloke, and he'll go on to have a good career with us, touch wood. But he was beyond woeful. Cresswell was all over the place. They were just picking holes for us. It was a constant theme of the game. Lewis Cook would get on the ball. He'd have the freedom of Olympic Stadium, and he'd just be able to thread it through our midfield. He weren't mobile enough, weren't good enough. And we got to bear in mind that they are a team who's quite in a good place to judge us on. They're a team who got relegated last year. They were missing Fraser, missing Wilson, missing all their big players, as we were missing Rice and Soucek. I get that point, but we just looked very, very poor and looked like we were nowhere near it. I don't want to be too over dramatic, but it was a really poor watch. It was a bit of a weekend ruiner, even though it was a friendly, to be honest.
Exactly, their first and last chance of silverware this season up in the smoke. No, I think definitely on the Ben Johnson thing, and I agree, definitely not one to call him out. The whole squad looked just shot. There was obviously so much going on. There was very few people in the stadium, and the ones that were, it was all anyone was talking about was Noble's tweet from the night before and the general saga. Josh Cullen, we'll do the Diangana a bit of justice in a bit, but Josh Cullen came on. Manuel Lanzini limped off after 25 minutes or 30, about half an hour-ish, holding his thigh. Looked like he was injured. Don't know how. I saw you tweet about it, Tom. How unlucky that will be, I don't really know, because we were trying to get rid of him anyway, apparently. Josh Cullen came on. 2 assists for Jared Bowen within the space of 15 minutes, I think was he played in the first half. He scored 2 assists within 3 or 4 minutes, which was when Bowen's goals went in, and he looked really, really lively. He flattened off a bit in the second half. Whether or not he can be blamed for that, I think the whole team just got overrun, and Bournemouth looked really good. If anyone's listening, I'd put your house on them coming back up if you're a gambling man, because they looked excellent. Josh Cullen, though, Jonesy, Tom, sorry, do you think you can take a positive from that, and do you think he'll get game time this year?
Yeah, I think we have no choice but to give him game time, not because of his ability, just because we have a lack of players in that position. But to be fair to him, he was clearly good. He had a good game. He did change the game when he came on. He's proved himself. Unlike many players this day and age, he's gone out on loan. He's worked hard and very hard for his minutes at West Ham. He clearly wants to be there. He would have had chances to go permanently, I'm sure of it, in the last few years, and he's stuck at it, and he's really tried to earn his shot and making in the West Ham team. And now, at the age of 24, with the experience he's had, he's played in big games for Charlton, Championship, trying to keep him up, and playoff wins. I think he's ready. I think he's ready to add something to the squad, whether that be depth more than anything. I don't think he'll ever be a first-team starter for us regularly anyway, but he, for me, I'd give him a crack. We have nothing else. We ain't going to spend money on a centre midfielder, so we've got to rely on him, and he's a homegrown talent, and we always want to see them do well, and I really hope he does.
Well, most of us want to see them stay and do well, that's for sure. He's 24, though. I didn't realise that. I look today, 24. That's quite a long way into your career to still be going out on loans and giving chances, isn't it? But I think as always, we'll stick with the theme on the We Are West Ham podcast, and with the podcast motto, that pre-season does not matter. So we'll give them a pass. Hope that it was all just because of the Mark Noble and Dian-going fallout from the day before, and fingers crossed we can win the Betway Cup next season in front of fans and put a smile back on Jonesy's face. The headlines this week, lads, the TV news, you'll forgive me for not knowing the exact details, but this afternoon I believe it was announced that all games that weren't already originally scheduled to be aired on TV will now be shown live till the end of September. Am I correct in saying that? I think it's still going to be on the usual providers, so Amazon, BT Sport and Sky. West Ham's game with Newcastle on Saturday been moved to an 8 o'clock kickoff, I think, which whether it's a good or a bad thing means that we'll all be able to watch the team up until the end of September. Jonesy, it looked like a couple of stories emerged that West Ham were one of few clubs that didn't want the games to be shown on TV. I wonder why.
Yeah, I wonder why. It's a mystery. Apparently it was us and Palace that were the only two clubs that were against this agreement for September games to be all aired on TV. I mean, I saw Tom tweet about it.
Tom's been really busy on Twitter this week, isn't he?
Been really busy.
To do, lads.
Tom _ Edwards for anyone who fancies a bit of hourly entertainment at home. Go on, James.
But yeah, no, it doesn't really matter in the end because the agreement's gone through. It was a minority that was against it, just the two of us. So, for me, I think it's great. It just means that we've just got to wait a little bit longer on Saturday for us to have our head in our hands. So it won't be 3 o'clock Saturday, it'll be 8 o'clock Saturday. But it's good that we'll be out there to watch the games because I quite enjoyed being able to see every minute of the football after the restart after COVID. So I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Tom, Charlton, we're talking about Josh Cullen, obviously on loan at Charlton last season. We've got them in it's the second round, but West Ham's first round of the Carabao Cup, and then Leeds or Hull in the third round if we progress. And Jonesy's kindly written on the notes, which we probably won't. Tom, thoughts on the League Cup game?
I mean, I say it every year, but the club don't listen, or nobody seems to listen, but having a crack at the Carabao Cup is the best chance we'll ever get at winning anything.
They obviously don't follow you on Twitter, mate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the few who do will know. But for me, it's I'd rather that than anything else. Go out and have a cup run and do well, and that's what West Ham were about anyway when we were in our peak years and our glory years. And I think that it's a nice run. We could have a lot worse run. We've been drawn against some big sides recently in a lot of cup competitions, and with the run we have in the Premier League and the like. Without being negative, if anyone can look at the fixtures we got in the league and think it's going to be a tough run of it, so why not go out there, put a good team out against Charlton, get the job done? And I must say that my heart goes out to all the Charlton fans having to deal with what they're doing at the minute because it's sad right there at the minute. And hopefully have a good season, but not in a Carabao Cup.
We've got two unpopular owner derbies in quick succession, haven't we? Newcastle on Saturday and then Charlton as well. The like you said, Tom, yes, a sort of complete disarray. Certainly at Charlton, and you certainly don't envy those fans. The training ground, James, there's been a new sanitising tunnel installed, which is the sort of early front runner, I believe, where it takes fans' temperatures and then lightly sprays people with like disinfectant sanitizer, I believe. Can you tell us more about this? Because they're saying it's a front runner for something that could be rolled out at stadiums to allow fans in, not for some time though, I believe.
Yeah, it's strange that they're trying it at a training ground where you don't get thousands of people rocking up to watch a match of football. It's just a load of players and a load of staff. But it's on trial. I was reading the story on the Man Online, and they got pictures of it there. And yeah, I do find it weird. It says temperatures are recorded with clothes lightly sprayed with a water sanitizer. Which, yeah, I mean, I don't know how that's going to go down with a load of people just sitting there sopping wet watching the football. But as long as they'll be healthy and safe, I don't know. But
Yeah, I mean, James, if you're the sort of bloke who puts your appearance above the health and safety of others, even though you're a COVID denier, then that's, tells us everything we need to know about the sort of bloke you are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, but with all this said, it doesn't look like it's going to be in place at any stadium by the time fans are penciled in to return in October. So yeah, it's on trial, but I don't think we'll see it this year, or so we're led to believe anyway.
So what you're telling me, James, it wasn't even worth me asking you about in the first place.
Well, I mean, as it's semi-West Ham related, because we're trialling it, I suppose you're absolutely fine to ask me, Will, and I've given you an answer that, I mean, I don't really know what else to say.
A thorough and robust answer. I like it. The squad numbers were announced. Jared Bowen changed his number, an odd change, changed it from 17 to 20. I'm not sure why. I don't know if you two can shed any light on it. No number for Nathan Holland in the squad announcement. Are you surprised by that, Tom?
I've seen a bit of Nathan Holland actually at Oxford United. He was on the box a few times, the FA Cup. I was up at Wolves when he came on. He's really got a bit about him, talented player. So it makes, especially when we just sold a winger, I found that a bit odd. It's sort of a sign that he may not be involved, or at least Moyes isn't planning on using him, and it would take a lot for him to get called up into the squad. But it's gone ever since he had that loan deal. It all went a bit cold on him. I know he got a bit of an injury there at one point, and he hasn't really played much football since. But there was so much talk about him last year. He was nominated for PL2 Player of the Season, so he's obviously talented boy. But it's just another one of those young players who seems like he'll drift out of the club without making much hullabaloo, and he'll just end up somewhere, and that'll be sort of it with his West Ham career, with not much progress really. One game in the Premier League, a couple games in the League Cup here and there, but we've never really given him a shot at it, and it's another case, but he probably isn't good enough, to be honest.
Well, one man who didn't go through the water sanitisation tunnel at the training ground or wherever he was, to be fair, Jonesy, is Thomas Souček, our star midfielder, the Cheku Kuyati, as he's been dubbed, not really by fans, just by me, I think, and it hasn't really caught on. Yeah, he's self-isolating at the moment. I'm not certain whether he's actually caught coronavirus. Has he tested positive, or has he just come into contact with someone who has? I don't know if either of you can shed any light on that, but either way, he's self-isolating, which means he's likely to miss the Newcastle game Saturday, I believe.
Yeah, well, a couple of the Czech players before their Scotland game tested positive, and that meant that the entire Czech squad was put into self-isolation. I think no one else has tested positive in that group. It was all a little bit bizarre because it meant that then the Czech team had to then call up an entire new squad to face Scotland.
Just two capped players previously capped.
Yeah, and well, by the sounds of it, they gave Scotland quite a good game as well. So they're quite unlucky to lose in the end. But it does mean that the potential is that we won't have Souček available. I'm not too sure when that 14 days is up or 10 days is up, whatever it is, but it means that, although he hasn't tested positive, it means that, he's still going to be self-isolating wherever they are. Well, and we will be without him.
The original story emerged on the 6th of September. So if you're talking 14 days from then, you're looking till the 20th. So that could even mean, if my maths serves me well, that he could miss 2 games, which wouldn't be good at all. We've got some transfers coming up, and in the next segment, stay with us because we'll do the Grady Diangana situation some proper justice. I know the boys will have a lot to say on the topic. Tom Edwards spoke really well on the whole situation with the board last week. It's been not just West Ham news, but it's been national sports news for almost the entire week. The story's rambled on and on and on. So stay with us for all of that next. You are still listening to the We Are West Ham podcast with me, Will Pugh, Tom Edwards and James Jones. And it's been an absolutely crazy week at West Ham. Fan anger towards the board absolutely erupted after they decided to sell young prospect and academy graduate Grady Diangana for £20 million. The club insists that all the money will go back into the coffers on other transfers. Some scepticism, understandably, among fans this week. But we have been linked. Again, I say linked boys, pretty tenuously. James Tarkowski from Burnley seems to have been the loudest rumour that we've heard this week, a £27 million bid, I believe. Now, I spoke to someone on Saturday, bearing in mind this is sort of obviously a lot can change. And on Saturday, despite rumours to the contrary that an offer had been made, I was told by someone who would know that there had been no offer, but a serious conversation was taking place. So that was on Saturday. I'm fairly confident with that source of information. Since then, I think £27 million. James, you've called it pathetic and embarrassing. He's in his late 20s, Tarkowski. I think he's 28. Forgive me if you're listening and you fact-checked me and I'm wrong on that, but I think he's 28. He's a good player. He was disappointed, I understand, to not be included in Gareth Southgate's latest England squad. So before we move on to the full Diangana situation, let's just quickly look at the transfers. James Tarkowski, James Jones, what are your thoughts and beliefs?
The reason why I put that in there is because, although James Tarkowski plays for Burnley, and with no disrespect towards Burnley, but they're seen as an unfashionable club, and they don't get many players called up to national teams. And everyone goes, if James Tarkowski was playing for a bigger club, he would have many caps under his belt. He's that good. He's a good defender.
What about if he was playing for West Ham?
He would get called up. I genuinely believe he would. I know we've said for years that, some of our players deserve call-ups and they play for bigger clubs. But I think James Tarkowski he'd have a better chance at least. And that's no disrespect to Burnley. But, if you look at any of the stats from over the last 4 years that he's been at Burnley, he's always been up there amongst the top defenders in the Premier League. But not many people notice him because he plays for Burnley. And, I know a couple of people at work that they write statistical articles, analytical articles, and they rave about him because they watch him a little bit closer because they're writing about it a bit more. But he's a very, very good defender, and to go in, and I think the first offer was reportedly 20 million, which for me is if I'm Burnley, I'm insulted because it's their best defender, and in today's market, English defenders don't go for 20 million quid. And it's just ridiculous for us to even think that Burnley would even consider that.
Well, you can pick up a club's best winger or best young winger for 18 million these days. So I don't know what on earth it is that makes you think you know more about football, Jonesy, that you can make a wild statement like that. Look, I can already tell that I've done this the wrong way round on this segment. We should have gone straight into it. The Tarkowski thing is, as everything else has been this week, an offshoot of the Grady Diangana thing. So just everyone knows what happened. The club sold Grady Diangana for a bid believed to be 18 million, raising to 20-ish with add-ons. Cue Twitter fury, and we've said it before, there's often Twitter fury when you support West Ham, and if you follow a lot of West Ham accounts on Twitter, there is a lot of that already, but this was next level. I mean, you've got your captain, Mark Noble, who we all love him, but he's been pretty good for the club as well. He does tend to just keep his mouth shut and get on with his job. He came out and tweeted his first tweet. I did check. It was his first tweet for a very long time. The last one was Players Together, which I all agreed to tweet. The other stuff is like feel-good charity stuff that he tweets once in a blue moon. And for him to come out and say that he was angry and disappointed and gutted that Grady, a great kid with a great future, has been sold, I think tells you all you need to know. And it validated a lot of fans how they felt. Jack Wilshere, Arthur Masuaku, Sebastian Haller, Declan Rice and Robert Snodgrass. I think there might have been a couple more that I may be forgetting, all either shared, commented or liked the Mark Noble's tweet on Twitter as well. Wilshere, I find that slightly ironic. He's sitting there with enormous wages and perhaps we would have been able to keep Diangana if he wasn't hanging around the club like a bad smell. However, it was, I haven't seen something like it for a long time. Tom, you tell me first. Yeah. You're laughing now, but just what you talk, Mate, talk.
Yeah, I was the day before we obviously recorded our podcast and we were waxing lyrical. Me and my particular was saying how I thought he could be hammer of the year, how I think he could really impress it and give the fans something to get off their seats about and excited. A young, talented winger who's come through the academy, proved himself on loan. And when I mean proved himself, gone to one of the hardest leagues in world football as a young boy who everyone said wasn't physical enough in the Premier League, gone there, stamped his own authority on the league with flair, talent, bow-footed, driving at people, goals and assists, scored goals in a game where West Brom were behind to get promoted, to get them a point to get up, goal and assist in that game. He showed bottle heart. He's a talented young boy, and he was the leading light for us going to season without any signings. I think majority of fans would say that that's the thing that was exciting them the most leading into this season. Yet we've made a nonsensical, lazy decision, which basically shows how the lack of ability we have in the transfer market, whether that be because people don't want to deal with us or because our recruitment strategy is poor. We've ended up doing it against our will, supposedly, as the club said on their website, and that all the rumours coming out and all the noises that it wasn't ideal. We didn't want to do it, but we've ended up selling him because we aren't good enough in the market to offload players who we didn't want there, like Lanzini, like Anderson, like potentially Yarmolenko. And we've decided to get rid of one of our prized assets, one of the most exciting young English footballers in the country right now, to a rival who's potentially going to be a relegation rival. And it's a transfer which could really hurt us down the line. And it was just a really sad moment when the whole club seemed to implode on that very night before a friendly, when Noble should be sleeping, should be with the team, should be getting stuff organised for the game tomorrow and focusing on the season. And instead you've got almost anarchy amongst the players and the fans, where they're all sort of turning on the owners and agreeing with what fans have been saying for weeks and weeks and weeks. And it's just sad. We call ourselves the Academy of Football, yet we've let go Jeremy Ngakia, the guy to Porto, I don't know his name, the 16-year-old to Porto, and then Diangana within about 2 months of each other. And Declan Rice is strongly rumoured to still be off. And it just felt like a real kick in the teeth to every West Ham fan out there, because this is what we've all been grown up on. We're a family club who you tend to be a West Ham fan because you've got some connection to it. And one of those big things why we have connections, because we make our own players and we make very good players, and he's another one. But sadly, he's going to be applying his trade elsewhere, and that money's and all we've got is a meagre fee for him, where Ollie Watkins going for 33 million supposedly tonight, and we've got 80 million for one of the best players in the Championship last season. So
Ollie Watkins playing for a team that didn't get promoted, Diangana playing for a team that did. And Tom, you've hit the nail on the head there. For a fan base who has already in their hearts and in their minds, maybe not in the hearts and minds of those who run the club, but in the hearts and minds of the fan base who have already lost so much already, for the one thing they did have to cling on to, like you said, which is why everyone's loved Declan Rice's rise to prominence so much, is because of the fact he's a young player who's come through the academy. I know he came when he was 14. Diangana, I think, came when he was 10. Pictures emerging of him, 10 years of age the other day, just not given a chance for £18 million. And again, it's important to, it's clear, I think, how you feel about it, Tom. I feel the same. I just felt really sad about it. When Mark Noble tweeted, it just made me feel sad, because I thought, what is going on here? If Mark Noble, who's obviously a fan of the football club and had obviously just had enough, he will have seen it. He's got Twitter, and, he might not tweet much, but he'll obviously go on social media like everyone else. And whilst there was a lot of people going, yeah, excellent, Mark, well done. And I agree. And, so many fans who are very, very vocal and feel passionately about the predicament they find themselves and the club in, they must have felt vindicated by that. And that must have been like a huge weight on their shoulders going, yes, the captain, we're not just like the mad, angry crackpots like the club or like the board tried to make us out to be. The captain feels the same way. The captain shares our anger. Mark Noble, the fan of the football club and the captain of our football club, feels the same way. I think for that alone, it must have vindicated so many people. And I'm glad that happened. I'm glad there's not that there is that sense of belonging. And I think in a weird way, it's united the club and the players more than it has done for a long time. But yeah, I just felt really, really sad about it afterwards when it came out. No real sense of joy or whatever. And I think I texted you too and just said, what sort of a shell of a football club this is we've got left to support at the moment. Jonesy, before I go on, because I do want to ask you, and it's important that we put forward what the club has said, whether or not we agree with it or not, and we'll discuss that, of course, but just your sort of feelings for the whole week. How have you felt with everything that's been going on?
I mean, exactly the same. The thing with the Mark Noble comment, I think it summed up the entire situation that the club is going through at the moment. The entire I don't want to call it era, but period of its history that it's going through. In that we've had 4 years of unrest since we moved into that stadium. Mark Noble has been very, very good at supporting the board as best he can, supporting his employers. Not speaking out when the fans potentially needed someone like Mark Noble to come out and speak out, and now he's done that on a forum where he's almost inactive. Says all you need to know about the situation that we're in. He's gone out of his way to go on to somewhere where he's never seen or mentioned on, and he speaks his mind, and he joins the fans in that anger and them being upset. And I was talking to a friend of mine earlier, who's a Tottenham fan, and he was like, it's a disgrace that someone like Mark Noble thinks he can come out and say that. It's disrespected the board. And I'm like, well, at the same time, he might feel as if he's been disrespected and lied to by the board himself. And
absolutely,
I think
20 years of service.
I mean, and why is it seen that footballers can't come out and speak their minds? We always say we want footballers to be more honest.
Bang on.
We don't want to hear, we don't want to hear them toe the line and, rattle off the same old rubbish and the same old sort of media spiel that they do every week, after matches and, and stuff like that. We want footballers to be honest. And then when one is honest, people are like, oh, I shouldn't be saying that. That's a little bit disrespectful. And it's like, well, hang on, you don't really know what's going on. And the fact that he, club captain and fan for over 15 years, has felt the need to speak publicly about it with using such strong words, says all you need to know about the situation. When you've got people like Jim White on TalkSport, still supporting what's going on and stuff like that, and it's just frustrating because the excuse from the board is not, for me, it doesn't justify what's happened, and it might not have been such a strong reaction had the club not been bigging up the fact that Diangana was back in pre-season, assisting Haller coming out going, oh, he's, I can't wait to play alongside him this season. 2 days before he was sold, the club were like, oh, here's a picture of Diangana and Jared Bowen.
Gold tweeted a picture, didn't he? David Gold
David Gold put a picture of him in
you couldn't write it, could you?
And it's like, and then 3 days later he was gone. I don't know what Sebastian Haller must be thinking. He's like, hang on, what's going on here? The geezer just set me up with 3 goals the other day, and now he's just gone. It's just frustrating that, after all of that, and they've built fans up, this is a really exciting Championship player that's come back to us. He's proved himself at West Brom in a promotion-winning side, and now we've got him back. Look how excited you should be, setting up goals left, right and centre in pre-season. And actually now we're going to sell him. And to say that apparently that one of their one of their reasons is that it was the only offer we had for a player. You can reject offers for players. You can turn around and go, no, he's not up for sale. Have a go at another one of our players. And they had the ability to do that. And I'm not buying this. We had to sell to buy players because every other club is buying footballers in the Premier League apart from us. To sum that up. Frustrating week, angry week, annoying week, and sad week, and they've got a month to fix it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, to give it some balance, you mentioned Jim White there on TalkSport, and he's obviously close to the board. He's got a lot of contacts, high-level contacts throughout the football world. That's why he's presented in a primetime show on the biggest sports radio station in the country. There is an element to his job that requires winding fans up or getting reaction out of listeners because it does well on the socials, and their social media blew up this week, didn't it? That would have been great for TalkSport as a brand, their exposure. Jim White has done his job. Obviously, I think it was today he came out quoting a source close to the board. So you can't be. I wonder exactly how close to the board it was. Except, but that's the Jim White's a journalist, and he's presenting an entertainment program as well as information. So Jim White's done what he'd done. That got a sincere or severe reaction. But the board said, West Ham's statement read, and it's important we sort of allude to this as well, that the decision was made reluctantly, but in the best interests of the club with a view to strengthening the squad. So the facts of the matter are, whether or not David Moyes agrees with this, the facts of the matter are West Ham are blessed, not necessarily with talented players, because that would mean paying Felipe Anderson some sort of a compliment, but we're blessed with a lot of attacking wide players. We have got players in those positions. We've got Jared Bowen, Mikel Antonio, Felipe Anderson, Grady Diangana was one of those, Pablo Fornals. All of them can play across that attacking three midfield that we play when we play 4-2-3-1. So if, as I'm led to believe, we were offering Manuel Lanzini and Felipe Anderson about all over the place, and understandably, given the quality of their performances last season, no one was like, oh yes, please, we'll have some of that. How much are they on? Oh, north of 100,000, 140 Felipe Anderson, around the 80 to 100 mark for Manuel Lanzini. Who's going to want to pay those wages for those players? Felipe Anderson's not going to want to take a pay cut anywhere at all, so he's not going anywhere if no one's interested in buying him. What do you think, Tom? I'll throw to you on this one. But from that other side of it, if you were sitting in the boardroom, and again, understandably, no one is coming in for any of your players, barring maybe Declan Rice, are you able to see at all or empathise at all with the idea that, you know what, we are desperate for defenders, as the Bournemouth friendly showed, and if this is our only, that's the sticking point for me, if this is our only way of buying, exactly what Jonesy's just said, what's everyone else doing? Everyone else is managing to find money from somewhere. That's the bit that sticks with me. But Tom, are you able to empathise at all?
I'm able to understand that Diangana was the only one wanted and the only player people were willing to stump up any sort of money, let alone the money that the club wanted. And I get that side of it. But like you just said, then every single club in the Premier League, Aston Villa came up last year, who had no money the year before that, championship money they were getting. Obviously, get promoted, they get playoff money. Spent 100 million last summer. They're probably on their way to spend about 100 million again this summer. You got Newcastle, who owner wants to sell them, had sold them effectively, just waiting on this final approval by the Premier League. He's still gone out and bought a £20 million striker. Ryan Fraser on big wages. Jamal Lewis, as we've done this podcast, for 13 million. 13 million is no money in today's football. And then they're going out and put another bid in for another player. You've got Sheffield United, Ethan Ampadu, the two blokes from Derby. You've got every single club doing bids.
All right, Tom, blimey, you're making me depressed. I forgot.
No, but
no, you're right.
It shows you,
doesn't
it? It shows you.
Right.
Every single club in the Premier League has done business, serious business. Everton, who when we had Arnautovic and Dimitri Payet at the club, which is it seems years and years ago, it was no more than 5 years ago, we had a small window of opportunity to break in, to be one of the Premier League's elite top 8 teams or whatever. And we ballsed it up. And you've got Leicester, who won the league, fine, they're significantly better than us. We were 4 points outside the top 4, the same season they won the title. Since then, they've gone on to qualify for Europa League, get in finals, semi-finals or cup competitions. They've made the most of it. And they're a Midlands club. Everyone says London's a big selling point. They've gone out. They made the most of that opportunity. They've signed people, done everything. We've gone backwards. And we're not even linked with anyone. Usually West Ham come up and we link with everyone. And whether that's to do with people fed up and dealing with us, fed up, it just seems, it's just frustrating because you see all these other clubs who are around us who supposedly have poor owners or supposedly have things. And I'm not saying it's the owners. They may be cash strapped. I'm not totally blaming them, but just the fact that they chose probably one of our most prized assets. He's worth more than Anderson now. He's worth more than all these people. Young 22-year-old English winger who, had he played in the Premier League and done what he did last year in the Premier League, you'd be looking at 40, 50 million for him. If that ability, obviously, he's not going to transcend quite to that level. But it's just laziness and an inability to get on with it and have enough people willing to sell the players who clearly aren't good enough and are over the hill. And they've just gone, yeah, we'll take that and we'll put a bid in for a centre-half when it's the only place in the back four where we might actually have Premier League level players.
That's that. I'm not sure about that last bit, but that's the sticking point. And I think as well, the club were keen to isolate purely the financial matter, right, with their statement. I mean, let's break it down. First of all, a club releasing a statement to justify a transfer
Yeah.
Red flag number 1 right there. When does that ever happen? So already you know something's up there. Red flag number 2 is I think the club were keen to isolate purely the finances within that statement and say that, we're using money to balance out the squad. And you know what, fair enough, because we have got some attacking players, or more attacking players, and the defence needs work. However, the red flag number 2 is that you're trying to isolate just on the finances, and you're saying, like we've just covered, other Premier League clubs are spending money. So that's red flag number 2. You can find money from somewhere. And the thing that really gets me is that finances aside, Grady Diangana, there's so much political value or political damage, which as we've seen, to be done with that signing. Surely the PR damage, what's happened now, is not worth £18 million. If you had to put a price on the PR damage of what's happened now, surely that is not worth 18 million quid. Then your captain's tweeting about it. This is red flag city over here. I'm not a Formula One aficionado, but I'm pretty sure that if I was, there'd be a safety car out running around the track at London Stadium at the moment.
Race called off for me. It's gone.
Yeah, dangerous conditions.
Yeah, dangerous conditions. I mean, you're completely right, mate. And it's like they've said they're going to use that money to go and strengthen the defence. Well, 13 million of that could have got you Jamal Lewis. He's just gone to, they had enough time to go and maybe beat Newcastle to it, and they haven't done it. And you're telling me that he weren't on our radar. I mean, you'd hope that he was on our radar. This, as you said, red flags everywhere, and it just worries me that, and I think Tom's alluded to it a couple of times already. It worries me that we're struggling to buy players because clubs don't want to do business with us or know what we're about in the transfer window and are playing hardball deliberately. I think Simon Jordan's alluded to it on TalkSport previously that they are quite difficult businessmen to deal with, and sometimes that can be a good thing, but at the moment it's proven to be a bit of a bad thing, judging by the lack of activity. And Leicester have notoriously said they won't do business with us because of I think something that Karen Brady said in her Sun column, and Spurs won't do business with us. Sporting Lisbon have said things publicly in the past about that William Carvalho deal, and it's frustrating that we seem to have now a reputation of a club that's not to do business with. And now I worry that their intentions might be to reinvest that money into the defence, but are we going to be able to actually get any of those deals over the line? And if we are they're clearly not going to be our first choice. And then what we're going to be left with? As you said, red flags everywhere, and in terms of PR disaster, I mean, how they did not see this coming, I don't know. I really don't know how they didn't see it coming.
No, that's and some of the lads over at West Ham in the press team are good lads as well, and it's a job that I certainly do not envy. Do not envy them one bit. You must be able to go and get a job anywhere after you've done that though for a season or two, mustn't you? Look,
they deserve a knighted at the moment, bless them.
Look at this turd I polished for 2 seasons. Surely you'll hire me. But listen, I don't think there has been some other transfer stuff. We've got to move on. Passionate topic as ever. What I think is important is we don't get angry just yet about the speculation. So transfers, there is still time. So we never know. That the statement has come out. I think we're all within our rights, not just us three, but anyone listening, anyone on Twitter, anyone who's angry at all, just shouting at their colleagues at work about the situation, will certainly be entitled to that come the end of the transfer window if we're lining up with the same defence. If that happens, then, anarchy level Mach 9 that we've been at this week, I think will somehow manage to go one step further. But we'll wait and see for now. We won't bother doing any of the supposed transfer targets this week. We've seen Shane Duffy go to Celtic. Eze's gone to Palace. Wilson and Fraser gone to Newcastle. Jamal Lewis, as Tom mentioned, has signed while we're recording the podcast. James Tarkowski's still at Burnley, and Rhian Brewster, Liverpool youngster, supposedly linked with us. I think he's a Chadwell Heath boy, but not too many legs in that anyway. Let's just hope that Declan Rice doesn't go. But look, we've got our first opposition view of the season. Oscar Paul, the North East correspondent for the Sun newspaper, joining us next. And he'll be able to tell us how, if and why the Newcastle fans are actually happier than the West Ham fans for once, because their board has out-transferred us, which is not a good place to be when you're envying Newcastle's owners. Stick with us, because we'll have that next. You are still listening to the We Are West Ham podcast with me, Will Pugh, Tom Edwards and James Jones. And as ever, that was a passionate, emotional segment from all three of us. The Grady Diangana saga has affected every West Ham fan up and down the land and across the planet. And I'm sure all of our We Are West Ham listeners feel exactly the same or very similar to either me, Tom or James with the thoughts that we put across there. But thrilled, delighted, in fact, now to move on from that saga. There is a game of football, a Premier League game of football. Again, it only seems like 2 seconds ago that the Premier League season stopped and we got that draw on the last game of the season at home to Aston Villa. But I'm delighted to say that for our first opposition view of the season on We Are West Ham, we are joined by the Sun's North East correspondent, Oscar Paul, who covers a lot of Newcastle and will be doing so again this season. Oscar, thanks a lot for joining us. It's a bit of a weird time for us at the moment. We're used to looking at Newcastle and going, you know what, it could be worse because we could have Mike Ashley as an owner. But now all of a sudden, 3 signings in 36 hours or whatever it is. Callum Wilson, Ryan Fraser, and only this evening, Jamal Lewis come to St James's Park. All of a sudden, we'd give our right arm for a Mike Ashley.
Cheers, lads. Thank you for having me on, first of all. And I can only imagine the nature of the conversation that you boys have been having, watching on from afar at how your summer has turned out. And to be honest, a week ago, I would have expected this to be another very depressing segment. But actually, I mean, believe it or not, there's actually optimism in Newcastle. We looked as though it was going to be the summer where the Saudis came to town and we were going to be dining at the top table finally. And about a week ago, the only signing in the door was Jeff Hendrick. Andy Carroll looked like our only fit striker, or Newcastle's only fit striker, I should say. And things weren't looking good. But to give him credit to Steve Bruce, I mean, he has consistently said, and it's a soundbite he always uses, I will knock down the door of Mike Ashley to get the signings in to move Newcastle forward. And I think a week ago today, they lost 5-1 in a behind closed doors friendly to Middlesbrough, and things just were not looking good. Dwight Gale was injured for 4 months. Martin Dubravka, the keeper, was out. But as you said, the last 24 hours, I mean, I've only been up here 6 months, but I think from gauging the reaction, these 3 signings have given Newcastle a real cause of optimism, to be honest, heading into the season. And what a turn up for the books, really. It's quite incredible. But it's happened under Mike Ashley's watch as well.
Yeah, Oscar, just on that, you briefly mentioned the foul takeover there, and I think it was one of those topsy turvy stories, wasn't it? 1 minute it's on, then it's off, and then it's controversy involved and stuff. And I think it was almost a surprise that statement came out from the Saudi group saying that they decided to pull out, and then everyone feared for sort of the future of Newcastle in terms of this season. But at that time, did you think that this is over? Because there are talks now that there still might be something going on. Do you think that now this is Mike Ashley just kind of going, right, well, I'm just going to consolidate my position here and consolidate the position of Newcastle as still a valuable football club with a future?
I think it just reached an impasse where there was no way forward. I mean, you speak to the day they released that, their withdrawal, you speak to them and it was very, very, very much put the blame on the Premier League. And then there was this whole, I don't know if you followed every tweet the Premier League put out. I mean, thousands of Newcastle fans piling in, Premier League corruption, Richard Masters, this. They did come out and then laid the blame back at them. Amanda Staveley and the Reuben brothers, who were 2 parts of it, are still keen, but the biggest player, the 80% stakeholder, which potentially 80% stakeholder, the Saudis, they've gone quiet. And the biggest problem from the outset was, how do you separate So it was a public investment fund of Saudi Arabia, a sovereign wealth fund, which is headed by the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. How do you separate those powers? Because the Premier League would never let them come in, and I don't think they're going to come back to town. And I mean, it really was. It rumbled. You say it rumbled on a bit. It was going on for 4 months. 4 months of hope of finally getting rid of Mike Ashley, who you guys obviously know. You've got your own issues as well. But I mean, the guy is despised up in Newcastle. It doesn't really need to say that. And they thought they finally got rid of him. They're back at the drawing board, and there was no hope. I don't think on anyone that there was going to be any signings this season. Relegation looked, I mean, certainly not nailed on, but I mean a proper scrap, another scrap to stay afloat. But why Mike Ashley has finally put this money in, I don't know exactly. Is it a case of, well, he's got to keep the club in the Premier League to find a buyer? Maybe. Maybe it's Steve Bruce. You know, Rafa Benitez tried for a couple of years to get money off him. Didn't quite work. Steve Bruce has gone about his business quietly. And he's got his men. He's identified they had top goal scorer last season, John Joe Shelby, was 6. £40 million Joel Linton, I think, scored 2 goals. They've identified what they need. And they've done it with a few days to go before heading down to London. So, interesting times, lads.
Oscar, it's obviously been a short pre-season anyway. No one's really got a lot of minutes in. But how many of the new signings do you think will actually feature this week? Because obviously Fraser hasn't played a lot of football since lockdown whatsoever. Yeah. Wilson just signed this week. Jamal Lewis today. He was obviously away with Northern Ireland. But how many of them do you actually think will feature? Because I pray Wilson doesn't, because he scores every time against them.
I don't know if you saw that he also had a little cheeky dig at West Ham yesterday. You did see that.
Just reminding everyone that I think he said his comments, if I'm not wrong, were, they're a nice team to play against. I enjoy playing against those. It does well for my confidence. Cheers.
I would expect him to start, really. Look, Dwight Gale's out. Joel Linton's not a striker. Andy Carroll's Andy Carroll. You guys know that well enough. You can't go into a season with him first choice. So I'd expect Wilson to start. I think he's been training throughout at Bournemouth, whether it's a 60-minute job. Ryan Fraser, as you say, Tom, is he'd probably start on the bench, I'd imagine. Hasn't had any game time to go straight into it. Tough. Jamal Lewis, Newcastle don't have a left back, so I'd expect him to start. I mean, there's Paul Dummett as well, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him. And then the big one, we shouldn't forget Jeff Hendrick as well. That was an exciting signing throughout the summer, and he'll be on the bench. Maybe not. He might start alongside one of Shelby or Hayden. But I think you might have Wilson to contend with on Saturday, I'm afraid to say.
I was having watched the gone to the game on Saturday, West Ham versus Bournemouth, conceded 5 goals at home to a recently relegated side. Dominic Solanke, who couldn't get in the team ahead of Wilson at Bournemouth all last season, looked pretty lively against Issa Diop, who was continually rolling out the red carpet for him. Oscar, what's the feeling among the fans now after obviously we know the takeovers collapsed, but with these signings, there is a real affinity between West Ham and Newcastle fans because of the plight which both sets of supporters feel that they are in under their current ownership or regimes. Has the mood changed at all towards Newcastle? Because as a sort of independent observer for me last season, I felt pretty sorry for Steve Bruce, because a bit like I do with David Moyes, bit of a poison chalice. But is the feeling among fans shifted? Because it looks like they're doing some really good business. Well, they have, as we've just said.
I think it's a difficult one with Bruce, and I think it's split somewhat down the middle. I think you've got to remember that back in January, they had to give out 10,000 free season tickets just to fill the ground. People were put off. Ashley, the style of football under Bruce was turgid at best. It really was. And you also got to remember that he replaced the Messiah. He replaced Rafa Benitez. And when he left, it was very much a case of, well, where do we go from here? Brucey's come in. He changed it up, so he changed the system. He tried to get them playing again, but he hasn't won them over. I think it's very far-fetched to say he's won over the majority. I think that if there was a full St James's Park, there'd be a lot of empty seats, especially after this takeover. This, as I said, this takeover was the thing. It was the thing which is finally going to unlock the potential which Ashley had, in a way, been stifling.
What about these signings, though, Oscar? What about is there a sense of, we've actually got some decent... Like Callum Wilson's not really a hump it up the top merchant, is he? Ryan Fraser's a good, tricky, technical winger. These aren't like Andy Carroll and Jeff Hendrick signings where you just think, nothing's going to be pretty there. Is there a sense of that's all right, or as there is at West Ham, are there some fans that just go, I don't care, I don't care, I want Ashley out. We can sign.
I think a lot of those fans have gone and they're not coming back until Ashley goes. Do you know what I mean? But the doom and gloom is lifted. I mean, all you have to do is gauge it on social media. I mean, I think these three signings are three signings which you got. Just off the top of my head, when was the last time they had three exciting players? And up front, goals and creativity have always been the problem under Steve Bruce. They couldn't create. They couldn't. John Joseph talks, but they've got Sam Maximin, Almiron, and Fraser behind Callum Wilson, who 2 seasons ago, he scored 14, I think. Fraser and Wilson as a double act as well. I think they have the record for the most goal contributions, as in assisting each other. I mean, they come as a little bit of a package. And Bruce has always consistently talked about, look, we're trying to get there, but, it's small steps at a time to play the brand of football that we want, that you guys want to see on the terraces. And Joel Linton, £40 million, it wasn't his signing, but then where do you go to? An injury-prone Dwight Gale or Andy Carroll? But now, as you say, he's a top number 9, Callum Wilson, isn't it? And I'd say there is optimism. I mean, it might have only shifted from scrapping for relegation to 14th, which, what's that for optimism? I mean, Newcastle's a club. That's called West Ham optimism, Oscar. I'm trying to make a case for how Newcastle might get into the top 10 this season. On the paper, it seems below the what's the squad depth like? If Wilson, who has had 2 terrible knee injuries, what happens if? But on paper, I think they're top of the pitch is as exciting as it gets outside the top 6. Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Yeah.
Oscar, what now for Joe Linton? So you mentioned him, he's not a striker. 45 million arrival last summer, just 2 goals. Seemed to start well with that goal against Spurs early on in the season, but he just sort of faded out a little bit and lost his number 9 shirt to Wilson now. I mean, what's his future looking like? Does he still have a role to play in that Newcastle side?
It's an interesting one because obviously he's signed a big contract when he got here. It's going to be very hard to get him off the books. I mean, the writing was on the wall when Bruce said, look, the guy's not a natural goal scorer. And when you just give him
a 40 million striker, yeah.
But conversely, by taking that pressure off him of not being the Newcastle number 9 and a season adapting in the Premier League, in England as well, having spent his time in Germany, do you know what? I think he still has a part to play. He looks much better potentially out wide on the left, using a bit of his pace and power. He does have the attributes. You guys have seen him. He's got the physical attributes, but it just weighed so heavy on his shoulders. I think that number 9, the pressure, and 52,000 every time he misses it. It's audible the gasps in the stadium and. You read on what fans are saying. It can be tough for him. I think he was living on his own in a flat in the city centre, and it was tough. But Bruce, to his credit, stuck by his man throughout, and he has got a role to play because Newcastle aren't blessed with so many other options. He's not. I don't think he's a starter in a fully fit team now. But it's a long season, isn't it? And you never know what's going to happen. And I think it's. Who knows? He's not going to be a 15-goal scorer, but if he chips in, why not?
Absolutely, yeah. So you've mentioned the sort of players or the sort of team we can expect to face at the weekend. Just briefly, sort of, how do you think the game will play out style-wise, and then just give us a quick prediction before we let you go.
Well, Newcastle's defence is. You said who did you lose? You lost. You had a heavy defeat to
5-3 to Bournemouth. Bournemouth.
5-3 to Bournemouth. We did 5-1 to, or Newcastle did 5-1 to Borough. The defence isn't looking good. I'd go high scoring. I think there's going to be plenty of mishaps at the back. Fraser's not going to start. Newcastle, I can see Newcastle taking a while to gel and get into it. I think 2-2. I think
2-2. That sounds. I think we can all agree that West Ham will certainly concede a hatful, and it sounds like if Newcastle's defence is a bit shaky as well, that we can hope for a high score. But Oscar,
any of you predicting a West Ham win?
We haven't quite got to that bit yet, but if you'd have listened to the segment before, I think it's a pretty resounding no from all three of us. I think the 2-2 draw that you've just guessed there, Oscar, might be the most positive guess that comes out of the podcast all evening. But Oscar, you were our first opposition view of the season. We thank you very much for coming on and joining us, giving a bit of insight into the from a Newcastle angle, the opposition view ahead of Saturday night's game at the London Stadium. But next up, Tom Edwards will be leading Name That Game. So Oscar, thanks very much, and stick with us for the quiz and the West Ham women's segment next. You are still listening to the We Are West Ham podcast with me, Will Pugh, Thomas Edwards and James Jones. That was Oscar Paul, the Sun newspaper's North East correspondent, covering all things Newcastle this season. And there is a bit of board and ownership envy among the West Ham fans towards Newcastle, which tells you all that you need to know, I think, at the moment about the state of our very own West Ham United. But all of that aside, the real competition starts now. We'd done away with the Rogue Mystery Players quiz last season because we'd gone through all of the Mark Reapers and the Florin Raducoyus of the world. And sticking with the nostalgic tone, we've set up another quiz this season between the three of us, and it's Name That Game. Each week, the quizmaster, which this week is Thomas Edwards, picks a West Ham match from history and collates 7 necessary pieces of information about that game. They are obscure facts or piece of information about the game, the scoreline only without giving away the winner, 1 opposition goal scorer if there are any, 1 West Ham goal scorer if there are any, the stadium it was played in, West Ham's opponent and the season. It's 1 point for each piece of information the players get right. Tonight it's me going head to head with James. There is a tie break, which is the year the game took place, if the points are level at the end of the round. So there are 2, me and James can interrupt Tom at any time and start the guesses, and then it goes alternate from there. So, Thomas, it's down to you tonight. This is the first competition proper, unfortunately, for me and James, who got a couple of wins in the last couple of weeks when we were still working out the format. We're having to scrap it and go back. So it's 0-0. There will be beers on the line, as there were last season. 5 pints of Estrella that I had to purchase for James in a Farringdon boozer. They were very, very painful ones to pay for, but very nice ones to drink in the fantastic company of these 2 lads. Tom, take it away.
Just before I start, I will echo what Jonesy said last week. It is not easy to find a game. There are so many games or random stuff which happen with our club. But here we go. The first obscure fact is it was the first game we wore shirt numbers on the front instead of a shirt sponsor.
Right.
Any guesses?
I've got a feeling, yes, but because we have to give the information in order, I'm going to hold off for a minute.
All right. The scoreline, 3-1.
Right, okay. Oh. Right, I'm going to... Oh, no, I don't want to give it away. No, that might give it away. Go on, Tom.
One of the opposition goal scorers, Michael Owen.
Oh, I was completely wrong then.
I sold him up a river of lies here.
Right, okay. Yeah, I'm going to go.
Go on in.
I'm going to say one of the West Ham goal scorers was Carlton Cole.
No.
Oh. Jonesy, you get a
lifeline
shot.
For Jones.
You get a shot.
One of the West Ham goal scorers was David Di Michele.
Yes, it Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Jesus, that's electric.
Okay, so the stadium was Upton Park.
Correct. Points on the door.
James needs opponent.
It was Newcastle.
Yes, it was.
Oh, and the season.
This is tough.
Oh, I remember it. Was
I think I know it.
09-10.
Oh, no.
Is it 08-09?
Yes, it is.
Oh,
Yeah,
no.
It is.
Oh,
It is.
no.
It is.
James
It is.
Jones. So, Tom, just give us the full details. West Ham against Newcastle, was it?
Yeah, sorry, West Ham against Newcastle 3-1. It was the first game after XL went bust, and we didn't have a sponsor, so we put the shirt numbers on the front, and David Di Michele scored that goal where he flicked it up over one of the defenders' head, put it in with his left, and we all thought he was going to be mustard, and they were about the only goals he got. But anyway, it was for some reason I spent a long time trying to think about the game today, and it just popped to mind about something a bit different that we had, and I thought it'd be a good one to do.
That's a blinder, that one, Tom. I like that. So just to recap then, Jonesy, you got I think 3 points. Am I right that you got there, Jones?
Yeah, 3 points for me.
Yeah, so you got the West Ham goal scorer, you got the opponent, and you got the season correct.
That was good.
I was thinking West Brom away. I seem to remember I had a poster of West Brom away was around that time, which I thought was the first game. But that's absolutely outstanding stuff. Yeah, David Di Michele didn't go on to...
He got 2 that game, by the way. I didn't mention that. He
Yeah,
got 2.
I was about to say he got 2 that game.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Etherington got the other for us, and it was, quite a route. I think it might have been, maybe I'm wrong, but I think it might even have been Gianfranco Zola's first game in charge of us, actually. First or early on in his reign, at least.
Jonesy, I'm not sure how many episodes it's going to take before this joke gets old. Happy for you or the listeners to tell me, but you weren't playing rugby for that one, were you?
You know what, mate? It's so long ago, I can't remember. Can't remember.
Excellent.
I probably
stuff.
weren't. To be fair, I probably weren't.
Okay, so the scores, we've done away with the bonus 3 points for a win, and we're just doing points per piece of information. So as they stand, the points are 1 point to me, 3 points to James Jones, 0 for Tom Edwards, because of course he was the quizmaster. I think the quizmaster chair swings back round to me for next week. That's nearly us for the evening, but stick with us because next up we've got West Ham fan, sports journalist and women's football expert Ella German joining us to discuss the We Are West Ham women and not the We Are West Ham women. We haven't got a women's team yet. We're thinking about it perhaps, but it turns out that none of us...
Idea.
Yeah, we could do that, couldn't we? Tom, do you know any? Because me and James don't, I think.
I know one called Will Pugh, he can pass.
Yeah, I might be all right. But stick with us because we'll have all of that next. You are still listening to the We Are West Ham podcast. It's probably going to be one of our longest episodes in We Are West Ham history. James, Tom and myself having a lot to say about the Grady Diangana saga. Oscar Paul from The Sun giving us a little bit of insight into the Newcastle squad, the psyche among their fans who are usually more angry about their owner and their board than West Ham are, but not the case at the moment. However, after James Jones's inaugural victory in the first round proper of the Name That Game quiz, I'm delighted to say that we are joined by Ella German, West Ham fan, sports journalist and women's football expert, to talk to us in our new segment that we've been running for a few weeks now on the West Ham women's team. Ella, thank you very much for joining us. The mood around the women's team, both on the transfer front and the actual football front, a lot more positive than it is around the men's at the moment. A 1-1 draw with Spurs at the weekend. A pretty good start to the season.
Yeah, definitely. Last season, obviously Spurs' first season in the WSL last year, we lost them 3 times, which as a West Ham fan was incredibly frustrating. They beat us at the London Stadium. They beat us again last January. We scored a 90th minute equaliser and then they scored a 97th minute winner, and there's no worse way to go down to Spurs than that. But yeah, a good result to start off the season. Spurs are a good contender in the WSL. for those spots that West Ham are competing for. I have to say, after watching the match, I think we got let off quite lightly. They hit the bar a couple of times. They were all over us in the first half. But West Ham looked good. Hit back with a great strike from Adriana Leon, which I'm sure you've all seen on social. Fantastic goal. I thought she had a great game. But I would say that, although a draw isn't the best result you can get to start the season, it wouldn't be something I'm too worried about. I think I saw the West Ham account actually said that we had 7 debuts against Spurs on Sunday.
Yeah.
Quite something. Like, even looking at that team we had at full time in that game to the team we had last season is vastly different. Whereas I think Spurs only sort of had a couple of changes to the last time they were in WSL. So I'd say definitely a good result to start the season with.
Well, it's been as we just mentioned, there's been a lot of new signings, and no more so than signing England international Rachel Daly. Is that a sign of just sort of where the direction that England West Ham are going in, that they're signing sort of top international footballers? I mean, I think it was the Czech Footballer of the Year as well arrived as well.
That's right.
It seems to have been a really, really successful summer from the recruitment point of view.
Yeah, exactly what you just said, really. The fact that West Ham are able to attract that calibre of player, and it's only their 3rd season of being a professional team. So 3 years ago, they were in the 3rd division of women's football, losing to teams, lower down the divisions like Coventry, like Blackburn, and now we're up there competing with your Spurs, playing against your Man United. I think is brilliant. I think the Rachel Daly signing actually really took me by surprise. So it was rumoured that she'd be signing for an England team. She'd been over in America, and the sort of videos of her clearly in England with it raining and a jacket on, you think that's not Texas, is it? But I was convinced she'd be at United, or she'd go to maybe Everton. She's from Leeds. So I thought, she'll go to one of the big teams up north. So when she started for West Ham, I was pretty blown away, to be honest. I think it's an absolutely fantastic signing, albeit only on loan till January. But I think she will be a fantastic leader in that squad, a fantastic role model for them to look up for. And also, like you said, Katarina Svitkova also joined the squad. Really excited to see her. She's got incredible stats from Slavia Prague. In 177 appearances, she scored 188 goals. Now, albeit that league isn't as competitive as the WSL, but makes me excited to watch her in action.
Yeah.
So, absolutely what you said. The signs are pointing in the right direction for West Ham. The fact that we can attract that player, the fact we've got a well-known lioness in our squad is really, really great for the future.
Tom, Tom, sorry to interrupt. Those stats sound like the ones you gave me before you came and played with me on a Wednesday night once.
It wouldn't surprise me, mate. I honestly forget how many goals I score. Some Power League have honestly told me, they've seen me for 30 minutes. Sometimes they pulled me off and said, let the kids have a go. But this weekend, obviously, Arsenal coming off the back of a 6-1 win against Reading, and some of the goals they scored in that game were phenomenal. They look like a tough side to be playing, especially in front of the first fans are going to get in, aren't they? About 1,000 fans are going to be in there watching at home for us. So hopefully that will make a difference. But what do you make of this game on the weekend? Sorry.
Like you said, I think it's going to be really, really tough. Arsenal were fantastic on Saturday. So Sunday it was. I thought they were absolutely brilliant. The football they played, the team goals they scored, and Vivian Miedemar scored a banger as well. They were fantastic to watch. And I think it would be really, really tough. I think the biggest thing for West Ham is last season they were quite inconsistent and quite leaky in defence as well. I hate to bring it up, but we lost 8-0 to Chelsea last year. So I think we can't afford to let those big teams, especially the likes of Miedemar up front, Beth Mead, Caitlin Ford, Jordan Nobbs, all the big names in women's football, can't be letting them run riot, really. But I remember last year we played them on the first game of the season, only lost 2-1. And I remember we hit the post a couple of times. So we can give them a good go. But I think the most important thing for West Ham to focus on is, keeping that defence tight. Just don't let Vivian Miedemar on the ball, basically.
That's easier said than done, I think, for sure. But Ella, you mentioned there the good signings and the positive work that West Ham have done over the summer, and obviously you thinking that players might have gone elsewhere or to other clubs within the WSL. What is it at the moment that's making the West Ham women's team? For those of us, like the three of us, we're keen to shine a light on the women's team this year, and there'll be people listening who perhaps don't know as much, if anything, about what the West Ham women's team get up to. What is it that's making West Ham such an appealing place for these big names to sign for this summer?
I think the club, I've been really impressed by the sort of effort and investment they've put into the team. I sort of said this when they first, made a big stride to take them from the third division to professional. And then doing that again this season, we've taken them to Victoria Road to play in a new stadium, an actual purpose-built football stadium, rather than one of the pitches at Rush Green, giving them their own facility at Chadwell Heath. I think for any female footballers out there looking at those facilities, looking at those opportunities where they could play, and the club's clearly got ambition for their women's team, I think makes it a really, really attractive place to play. Something I wanted to mention is there's another documentary out, the behind the scenes documentary, Squad Goals on the West Ham women's team.
I think you've just nicked James's question, I think.
Nabbed it.
I'll go on anyway. And yeah, the Squad Goals documentary I think is fantastic. Obviously, I imagine you've seen the one last year, British Youngest Football Boss, on Jack Sullivan.
Jack Sullivan, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was a good initial tool to promote the women's game, but for me it focused a little bit too much on Jack and it got a bit cringe at times. I think as a West Ham
imagine that.
Do that, but at points I was like, oh come on, it's not all, I don't want to be following Jack around every single episode for 30 minutes. But this new one is really great, sort of really focuses on the players and really delves a bit deeper into what it's like to be a professional women's footballer at West Ham. So would really recommend that. And yeah, I just think that exposure the women's team getting is really great as well.
Anyone listening at home, where can they watch that, Ella?
BBC iPlayer. I think they're showing some episodes on BBC One on a Sunday night, sort of showing them weekly, but you can watch the whole series on iPlayer now, which is, really recommend it as a West Ham fan. It's a great watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we hope to. Obviously, you're far more of an expert than three of us here, but the three of us, certainly, if fans are going to be able to go along to watch the women's team, we're going to try and get along there a few times this season to watch the girls in action. But it certainly it seems like an exciting time, and luckily for the women's team, they managed to separate themselves from a lot of the negative PR surrounding the men's side at the moment. For the women's team, what are your sort of expectations for this season? You mentioned some of the huge teams that are in that WSL who they're competing against this season, and there already does, if you look at the league table last year, there seems to be that correlation of whoever throws the most money into it, as in the men's game, it seems to be buying success in the WSL. What do you sort of think for West Ham is a reasonable expectation this season?
Yes, exactly as you said, there's a huge goal in the WSL. And I think that top four will no doubt be the Chelsea, City, Arsenal, United. Now, I think the league then breaks down into, out of 12, there's probably another four there, which I'd say are West Ham, Everton, Tottenham, Reading. Last season we finished 8th, so sort of at the bottom of that top four. But I think a great season for West Ham would be, keeping in that section. We don't want to be falling down and dropping to the likes of the teams I think will struggle, the Brightons, the Bristol Cities, the Birminghams, the clubs that are a bit more financially restricted than sort of the teams that come with Premier League men's teams. I think a great season for West Ham would be, to improve on last season's, but I don't see us really getting near that top four. I think the gulf is too big in terms of quality and financial investment. But I'd say a 6th or 7th, I think, would be a great finish for West Ham this season.
Excellent. Well, Ella, we really appreciate you joining us. Just quickly before you go, what's your score prediction for the women's team this week? And then give us one for the men's against Newcastle as well.
I'm a West Ham podcast, so I can't say against Arsenal.
Don't worry, you wait till you hear our prediction for the men's team in a minute. I won't worry about that.
Can't be more negative enough, I'll tell you that.
You don't have to be on brand here.
I think let's go. I think we'll lose 3-1 to Arsenal. I'm going to make it slightly positive. Get us a goal. The men's. Team, where do I start? I'll be positive. They need some positivity. I'll go for a scrappy 1-0 for the boys.
Scrappy 1-0. That's excellent. Ella German, West Ham fan, sports journalist and women's football expert. Thanks very much for joining us for our first guest on the West Ham women's segment that we're doing at the end of our show every single week, and we'll be doing throughout the rest of the season. So we hope to speak to you again, and hope we can discuss a bit more of a successful West Ham women's team than perhaps we see on the pitch at the London Stadium. Ella, thanks a lot. So that was Ella German, West Ham fan, sports journalist and women's football expert, covering all things West Ham women. Positive signs for the women's team. A very, very difficult game against Arsenal at the weekend. Ella opting for a 3-1 defeat. Well, lads, finally, nearly 2 hours later, I think this will be one of our longest ever shows, but I think you two will agree, as will everyone at home listening, we've packed in stuff into every minute, and not a minute has been wasted. Any final thoughts, Jonesy, from you? Bit of a tough week for West Ham. An excellent podcast put out off the back of it, which seems to be the way with shows that we've been doing for the last couple of years. Every time something bad happens, we tend to put out our best shows. What are your final thoughts?
Yeah, my final thoughts are that just hope that the coming weeks, what's happened prior doesn't snowball into something a lot worse. I mean, it might seem at the moment like it couldn't get any worse, but you just never know, do you, really, with us. I'd like to see us, if we're not going to win at the weekend, at least put in a strongish performance. And I know there's like a lot of fans have lost hope in us getting the result at the weekend, but again, like I said, you just never know. We might turn up and win 3-0, and no one would be surprised if we did. But it'd just be nice over the coming weeks just for things just to die down, sign a couple of players, and we can enjoy recording episodes where we're not having a moan and a groan for once. That's what I wish for, guys. That's all I wish for.
That's all you want. You're not a man of, you're not high maintenance, Jonesy, are you?
I'm not, no. I just want to smile every now and then,
I think we're all agreed, James, that the key to all of this will definitely be whether West Ham sign anyone. I think if we're having a conversation in a couple of weeks' time, or a few weeks' time, when the transfer window's closed and we've got the same squad as now, I dread to think about the sort of anarchy that we will see in and around the football club. Thomas, great stuff from you tonight, as ever, especially on the issues that really matter. What are your final feelings after an excellent show?
Yeah, exactly, and I'm with Jonesy. Just a hoping for something positive to happen around the club, a bit of something to take your teeth into and have a bit of hope going into the season, because every football fan in the country lives in the summer for that first game of the season where anything is possible, and you've got that idea that who knows what can happen, and maybe it will be the season you get in Europe or something, or whatever it is. And I hope that we have a little bit of positivity. And just at the end of the show, to wrap up, I'll let everyone know that West Ham under-21s beat Southend 3-1 tonight. 17-year-old Odie Becker got 2 again, and something like that, maybe him coming on the scene and getting in the man of the match day squad, because he's scored a lot of goals this season, would be something to look forward to. So just a glimmer of hope, mate, but we've got a good enough squad to go out there and be more than safe this season. So just come out on a weekend, put in a good performance, and hopefully we're sat here in a week's time and we're waxing lyrical about someone who's done something great for us on the weekend.
Absolutely. So that was West Ham beating Southend in the EFL Trophy tonight, I believe. Yeah, I think you're right there, Tom. The glimmer of hope we can hold on to is the fact is Declan Rice and Grady Diangana were 2 outstanding recent prospects from the youth academy, and we haven't seen any of those for a while. Well, that is it from us this week. Stay with us and keep your eye on We Are West Ham during the week, and especially get your ears around next week's podcast. We've got a huge announcement to make, the three of us. We've got something that we secured and finalised only this afternoon, so it was too much of a rush to get it out and get it all put together and ready for tonight's show, but stay tuned next week because some big news coming as far as We Are West Ham are concerned, and it will mean an exciting new segment on the show from next week onwards. You can join our Fantasy Premier League, as Jonesy has also already mentioned. The code is all lowercase CNY60U. CNY60U for the Fantasy Premier League to battle against me, Jonesy, Tom, and the rest of the We Are West Ham listeners. Already more than 300 people signed up, which is a very small percentage of the amount who listen to this podcast every week. Follow us on Twitter and on Instagram at WeAre_West Ham on Twitter. You can subscribe now to our YouTube channel and watch this show. You can get to see the lovely faces of James and Tom, and also my dodgy Barnet as well. So the YouTube link will be in the podcast description. So just go down on your phone and click on that. And while you're there, while you're in the podcast, on the podcast platform, why not give us a review? Didn't have any last week, but give us 5 stars. Write a couple of kind words, or write some unfriendly words if you like. Tell us what you think of our dodgy Clobber or our dodgy Barnet. But thanks, everyone, as always, for listening. I know it's hard, but try and keep the faith if you can. We're still West Ham United. We are West Ham. Up the hammers, and we'll see you next week.
Hello there, I'm Tony Gale, and you're listening to We Are West Ham podcast.